heading now over to Frank Polhaus, to a person, I would say, from the ground, who had made a lot of experiences from the ground. I don't know, Frank, if you're able to actually tell us how many rooftops you have already installed in India, maybe even including residential, but I would say you were personally involved in at least dozens of solar rooftops. Looking forward to your experience, your advice, where the market is heading to, and to which extent you actually see that this makes a lot of sense for industrial and commercial consumers. So looking forward to your presentation. Floor is yours.
So thank you, everybody. So, okay, this is a German-Indian workshop. So I play the role of the German, of the lonely German in more than 1 billion Indians. So let me talk about my experience in nearly a decade of solar work in India. So yeah, I will quickly introduce who we are. Then I think according to what Vinay say, why would an entrepreneur invest in solar? Vinay has already highlighted that, but I will also see my view on that, and typical obstacles that we have faced, and then some lessons learned. Maybe about India, not this is how to do business as a German in India. So we are a solar EPC company that has been founded like really 10 years ago. It is a German, it started, let me put it like that, as a German-Indian joint venture. Right now, the German participation has gone out. So the company is now entirely owned by an Indian family business, and we are based out of Gujarat. So we are one of the largest independent EPC companies. We don't belong to anybody or any power company. We are not any subsidiary, any arm. We are an independent family-run business, and currently we look at more than 150 professionals working for us. So we have...
Frank, sorry for interrupting. Maybe you could have a click on this Ausblenden, then yeah, very good. Thank you.
Sorry for that, and thanks for the advice. One of the good stories that I cannot get tired to tell is that we have always thought of using India as a hub to branch out into other markets and other companies. So we have quite a strong back office that is engineering, procurement, like typical back office functions. And we have branched out into the Middle East something like 2.5, 3 years ago. And we now have a very successful business running out of Dubai, where we are currently supplying the Expo 2020 in Dubai with a lot of fancy solar rooftop and facade projects. So that's, from an entrepreneurial point, a very strong thing to say when we talk about India as a German. So yes, that is 10 years of very intensive German-Indian friendship. This is how we started. I look much older. I still have gray hair. I look older today. These pictures must have been taken 10 years back. So now, why would an entrepreneur invest in solar? So there's soft reasons, and there might be not so soft reasons. The soft reasons would typically be, okay, he might want to be represented as a green and modern company. So we have this already mentioned by Vinay, corporate social responsibilities, internal carbon mandates, these typical things, RE100 stuff. And then the hard reasons, power independence. We have been touching this when we talked about the storage. And then I think, from my view, the by far dominant reason, unfortunately, in many aspects, is that most people, entrepreneurs, would think about the profits of making solar. And that is driving most of the activities as far as I can see. And as of now, this might be changing. So I will still start with the representative part of the solar business. So we, for example, have done quite some projects with the Akshardham Temple. Akshardham Temple in Delhi, every Indian knows Akshardham. It has its own metro station near the Commonwealth game sites near the river. So we have been powering the temple I think for these guys, this was more of a representation issue than or opportunity rather than a mere financial approach. But we have also given smaller solar plants as a donation to orphanage and churches and this kind of organizations. And finally, and I want to put special emphasis on that, we can also give PV as a part of a building, of a modern building, energy saving building. We would call that high fashion architecture. So we can put solar in glass panels and make this look very nice. This is something we learned in Dubai. Dubai is full of high fashion buildings. And I strongly think that entrepreneurs should take this high fashion architecture, the beauty of solar into their buildings in India and tell the world we are green and we are modern. So that is, let's say, the soft reasons. And now I come to the profit. So why would an entrepreneur do that? We have talked about batteries, so there might be a thought of power independence. I will talk about that in a minute. Then there is the main reason, substitution of grid power at a lower price. Vinay has had a nice graph where he showed the average power prices for the various and most important states. And actually the good statement was solar is cheaper in all of these states. I remember this green band. We all know Maharashtra, and I think one of the Pradeshes has the highest power prices in India, and solar can easily compete with that, and that's a no-brainer. And then finally, you could think of selling power to the grid rather than using it yourself. So let me clearly say, solar cannot really be used as a power independence measure. It can be in conjunction with storage, but not as on its own, obviously, because there is no power of solar in the night, and there might be on a rainy monsoon day, there might not be even much power during the day. So power independence and solar would not go well. The same actually holds true for selling to the grid. I will discuss why nobody in these grid companies wants solar power. Also Vinay has touched it. And the final thing, so it is all about substitution of grid power at the lower price that solar offers. So ideally, we do that at the low tension electrical infrastructure on these rooftops. We don't want to build high tension. We don't want to put transformers. These factories, all their machines are working on LT. So let's connect solar on the LT as if it were a negative load. Think about the phenomenon of auto consumption as putting an energy-saving light bulb rather than and replacing your incandescent light bulbs. So it's the same. You're on the shop floor of these factories that I will show you in a minute. We put a negative load. Negative load means something generates power, and the power goes directly to the machines and the applications that are run at this shop floor. So this is most profitable, obviously, with the higher electricity tariffs that we are replacing with the auto consumption. Reason? Why am I emphasizing this? There are obstacles. One of the obstacles is we are doing all this in the distribution grid. And obviously, this happens at retail prices. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to replace expensive industrial power that has all the charges coming, the taxes, everything. So it hurts discoms. We take away very profitable business from someone, and there is a natural conflict. And there is, I think, little hope for this to change in the years to come. I see that the emission targets for discoms are not efficiently enforced. Vinay has mentioned RPOs, the renewable purchase. Okay, so I was talking about the conflicts that an industrial client would have with its discom if he wants to generate cheaper solar power. Because what I said is he's taking away business from the discom company, and that is not something the discom company wants. So there is a natural conflict that leads in extended, let's say, processes and all of that. So it's a win-lose relationship. So what I want to recommend, so obstacles are there to be overcome, is at least if you have these big industrial plants, this is a first example in Maharashtra, the state with one of the highest power tariffs in India. If you have such a huge, let's say, this is a chemical plant, you would not have any issue with the discom because you use all your power within your system. I think Rupam has already mentioned we cannot go far beyond the 15% of power that solar, or it would be nice, sorry, we cannot go anywhere in these heavy industries beyond the 15% of power consumption that is met by solar, because the roofs are simply not big enough or the loads are simply too big to be covered. But 15% that you get at, let's say, half the price, to say something, is still a lot of saving on energy budgets for these companies. So it's a clear no-brainer to do that. And this example, as I said, we don't have any problems with the discom because we have full auto consumption. Typically here 2.5. We have seen the Skoda plant with 8 megawatts. So these plants typically start from 1 to, I think, 4, 5 gigawatt. After that, it will be more challenging to find roofs that offer the size suitable roofs. So this is a typical project that we done. We have, as you rightly said, I have done many of these. One project in Gujarat, for example, is Sarah. Everybody who uses bathrooms in India knows Sarah. I think it's a leading ceramic manufacturer in India. Their main headquarter is in Gujarat, a country with relatively lower electricity tariffs. Still, we see these 100% auto consumption. On this picture, you see that not all the roofs can be used. Some of the roofs have issues with asbestos, structural load, subject corrosion under the roof. So we have put plants selectively here, unfortunately. So we have only met less than 10% of the total consumption. But what was the main reason for them to invest was a tax incentive. I have spent more time in this process with the accountant rather than with the engineers. And this accountant, I think he was a very smart man and used solar to optimize his tax payment to the government. And that was a very, very nice project, actually. So the third project I just quickly want to mention is in Delhi itself. It's the airport. And here again, I can only repeat, we have a 24/7 operation. There is no issue with any feedback of power to the grid at weekends or Diwali time, something like that. It's not there. The airport is 24/7. We have a 2-stage project. So it started with a 2 megawatt project with GMR, and then we added another 1.72 with a Celebi. These are the infrastructure companies supplying Delhi airport. Again, here we can only have a maximum double-digit number, less than 10% here of the contribution of solar to the total energy balance. What the lessons learned here is the air quality in Delhi we have completely underestimated. So here is really a problem for solar because all these foggy days lead to a somewhat lower than expected energy output. So I'm also here to talk about negative experience. So this was the project itself is a really nice project, but that one is a little bit of a downer that you see daily energy outputs are so low. Well, we all know why. So let me come back to the experience of a German in India. The role we play, or I played, our company played, we were the technical experts. I mean, I started solar in 1994, and so did Abakus, the German company I was heading. I was not heading, I was part of the executive committee. So we gave technical knowledge to a lot of engineers in India to make the back offices I have been talking about stronger. So we have been involved in hundreds of plants, and we always did this on a very cooperative basis. So rather than teaching as a German, there's a lot to learn. So I met a lot of people in India. We went to parties, we had inaugurations, celebrations of all kinds, business relationships. So working at 50 degrees, the picture in the middle. So there's a lot to learn, what to do and what not to do, especially the heat can be quite challenging. To learn how Indians do things also helps when doing business in India. This guy, if you look at this picture, he's working on some bamboo rods with nothing left and right. I have never seen a scaffolding like that anywhere, but this guy managed within no time to put his cement to the entire facade, but just simply by moving these 10 or 15 rods, and these gaps are empty. So I was telling about the heat on these rooftops. So you have in all these industries these drinking taps. So I was always wondering, how do all these people drink? But hundreds of people drink out of a single tap. You will always find these cups near the cap. So what would the Germans do? I mean, I don't see I think you know these cup holders with waste. So what I learned in India is to drink out of a cup. And this tells a lot about the things we can learn as Germans in India while promoting our technology that helps to make India green. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and sorry for the technical disturbances we had.
Yeah, Frank, thank you very much for your insights from the ground. So I was wrong. You were not involved in dozens, but hundreds of solar plants. Very impressive. For how long have you been in India working in the space of solar?
We started in 2010. I went full-time 2014, and the last 2 years I have spent mostly in Dubai looking at after our branch office. So it's something like 10 years that I have been working in or for India.
So lots of experience from the ground, and yeah, I would here with open up the discussion, maybe picking up with one of the most interesting points which had been mentioned by you, Frank, which also was mentioned by Vinay, Rupam, and me, is that there is a tendency of feed-in tariffs being reduced, or net metering being changed towards gross metering. So it means you get a lower tariff than what you actually pay to the grid, or there is delay in grid connection. So heading towards self-consumption systems. So I would request Vinay and Rupam to turn on their cameras, or if there's bandwidth connections, then yeah, whoever is able to do so. And we'll start the discussion. Maybe I'll ask you, Vinay, once again. So do you see a tendency towards self-consumption? I mean, Frank actually made it clear most of his clients opted for as much self-consumption as possible, even going for maybe a smaller PV plant, but covering 100%. So you're interacting with a lots of developers and industrial customers, Vinny. Any thoughts on that, or do you see, oh, no, there is states where you can actually reliable count on 20 years of net metering, or feed-in being guaranteed through gross metering?
Sure, Tobias, thanks. So I think the quick answer is that most consumers, contractors, or developers should and do a detailed analysis of what is their load profile and what is the likely capacity that they can install, and the power output profile from such a system. I think the sensible thing is to make sure that you are not relying on net metering, whereby you have to bank the power with the grid in terms of large quantity, because I think the future of the policy, net metering policy, is very clear that we are going to move to gross metering over a period of time all over India. So the best thing to do is to be conservative and make sure that the system is designed in such a way that all the power can be absorbed and consumed within the premises without or with as little possible reliance on banking as possible. I think in most cases that should definitely be the case for all the working days. And I think people can make an informed decision on what happens on non-working days or holidays. But I think the writing is on the wall. I think the most states are going to withdraw the net metering policy benefit, and the right thing to do is to size your system prudently and not bank on the policy for injection of surplus power into the grid.
Right. So feeding into the grid can be an add-on or thought as an add-on, but you may not count on this for 20 years, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so that would be a big difference to the situation in Germany. I think Frank made it really clear with this example of just imagine your solar rooftop plant as a light bulb, and change towards energy efficiency LED, you just reduce the consumption you're taking from the grid. So Frank, maybe 2-3 more words on your thoughts on this, because you had said tax depreciation and things like that were also of importance. But yeah, your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I completely agree to Vinay. I mean, let's try to avoid any involvement with discoms. And we have seen maximum 15% of the energy that this big heavy loads take can be replaced by solar. So I don't think there is a real issue with feeding back units to the grid. This is rather the exceptions than the rules. And I mean, even if you say on a Sunday there's no consumption, the factory is zero on a Sunday, it would be 1/7 in the 7 day. So 1 day out, 1/7 of the equation. Still, solar is much cheaper than 1/7. So, even if you accept, it's hard to accept in the renewable community that at certain stage, when we have too much solar for the given load, we have to accept that we just throw it away, we give it away for cheap, or we use thermal applications, we generate heat inside the factory using very cheap resistor type of loads to add additional loads, or charge a battery, whatever, to waste to not give the power to the grid. So you may heat up some thermal processes, give extra heat to these with very low cost ohmic resistances that you put to heat up your stuff, all of that. Or economically, it doesn't matter if you waste the energy. You just waste it. We will have to get used to that. We will need much more wind, much more solar to power the world. And we need solar when it's needed. And the few hours when in Germany we have the phenomenon of negative electricity prices. So there is hours when the electricity, the electricity markets turn into negative. So that's not a problem right now. It's not a problem. Maybe you lose 10% of your income, but if your energy is half the price, you calculate it as a cost in a way, right?
Yeah. So we even put it like even with 2 days, even if you don't have consumption on Saturday and Sunday still, I mean, it depends on the state. And I think this is exactly where Rupam ships in. So he will make sure that no kilowatt hour at all is being wasted, and that you don't put any consumers which actually are only there to consume electricity which you don't need. You put a consumer which gives the electricity back to you. And so we have heard that a strong business case for a battery might be then storing electricity towards the night, because we have heard no, solar is not shining, sun is not shining at night, but the wind is not also always blowing at these later evening hours. That's for some states and some regions, so that would have to be seen, if you consider also wind. But still, this is one case. And the next one is to actually shift a quite nice proportion of the electricity generated during weekend times back to the week. No, so yeah, your thoughts on this? You have spoken to lots of industrial and commercial customers. Is this a consideration? Because I hear from developers also that they are talking more and more about PV combined with storage, even though they're putting smaller storages, but still. So any thoughts on from your side, Rupamji?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we would like to get there, where you are storing all of that energy that would otherwise be wasted, and use it when you most need it. But I think given where the prices of a battery storage system are, I don't think we are there quite yet. I think right now we want to think of batteries, more for the kilowatt, megawatt capacity that it provides and how it helps you maintain a certain quality of power, so that you don't have to resort to much more expensive diesel power. So I think that's where it makes the most sense right now, commercially speaking. And you can create a roadmap. So like I said, if you're going to buy 4 diesel engines, each of them, like, let's say 500 kVA each, I would plan where you buy 3 of them and put 1 battery storage system, and that helps you do many things besides playing the role of the diesel generator, which the one diesel generator that you've not bought, and it helps you firm up your power and quality of your power, and you can store the power from that excess solar into that battery storage system, and make the most out of it. So I think what we'll have to do is we'll have to do a combination of multiple things, and including like the fixed cost reduction as well, right? So you'll have to do a combination of all those things for it to be feasible right now, and then create a roadmap to then increasing battery storage in your mix as the price of battery drops.
Yeah, so you would say that still there is business cases where one should consider maybe hybrid systems of diesel gensets and batteries, even though Frank would say let's try to go for no diesel genset at all, I guess. But yes, so you have customers and clients interested in hybrid systems?
That's right.
Diesel and battery? That's what
That's
you were
correct.
saying, no? 2, 3
That's
diesel genset and the bigger battery.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, Frank, asking you on the ground, your customers who put solar still had the diesel genset in addition, or they were replacing it, honestly?
No. I mean, they all have gensets. As Rupam, the picture with the motorbikes. So, everybody has these gensets, but I mean, without storage, how can you replace a genset with solar if it's a cloudy day? I mean, these guys are manufacturers. They need power to get their products out. So you can't afford. I mean, this is why they put the gensets, right? They want 24/7 power independent of the grid. Nobody wants to spend the huge amount on diesel. Nobody wants the noise. It is very, very disturbing if you have an office with a genset in front of your door. I mean, you get used to it, but it is very noisy and we have to get out of that. I completely agree to Rupan, but solar in itself cannot solve that problem. So we need to think about solar plus storage. That's the ideal thing to do. Or storage without solar can also do the job.
Yeah, so for our German listeners here, replacing diesel gensets might be more like of a business case for very small businesses, but for mid-size or larger, the diesel genset investment would be still there, but you would offset the spending in the consumption of the diesel itself, or you avoid emission, no? So far.
I think from what I remember, Vinay may add to that, I think we had some years back a connection between northern and southern grid. So I remember the major market for these, for let's say solar storage hybrid was Tamil Nadu. But since these grids have been joined, I think the power availability in TN has also improved greatly, and the business model of solar hybrid has been greatly reduced. Maybe Vinay, I think I'm right with that, right? There is not a lot of market left for independent systems in TN like it was 8 years ago.
Yeah, please, Vinay, maybe pointing out a little bit on the topic of power cuts. So we have heard from Rupam, for critical processes, there is no other way, but maybe there's also non-critical business activities. And then one can actually say that power shortages and power cuts have been reduced, at least in many states. But still peak demand issues, as Rupam has mentioned. So your view on this, Vinay?
Sure, Tobias. I think the fact of the matter, unfortunately, is that even though now we have surplus power capacity at the grid level, supply to the consumers is still highly unreliable in many cases, at least for consumers who are connected at LT levels and below that. So, in fact, we just spoke to a few CNI consumers over the last few months, and it is shocking that when power projects in the country are running at like 40 and 50% levels, there are consumers who are still not getting reliable power in the country today. So that is the reality, and that is the reason why DG sets remain the ultimate go-to and the last resort for all consumers, and not just the CNI consumers, but even the residential consumers. So I think completely eliminating DG sets doesn't seem realistic in the short run. But yes, with solar, with introduction of storage over a period of time, that should definitely come down.
Thank you, Vinayji, for your perspective. Then there's a question from the audience, which had been a little bit discussed also in the chat. Maybe, Vinay, since you're also observing the wind market and private corporate PPAs with wind, open access, a few words on this topic, please. To which extent it makes sense to buy green power, use that even from the electricity exchange to become green? As a new potential to purchase green power. So please shed some light on to which extent you see a market for wind and private PPAs or other business models for CNI customers.
Yeah, so I think solar is kind of winning all completely in front of the wind when it comes to the CNI market. The reason for that mainly is that solar is much more widely available as a resource across the country in comparison to wind. The technology availability, the cost profile, the policy profile is much more amenable overall to solar than wind. The reality is that competitive wind power production is restricted to only 3 or 4 states in India. And for CNI consumers to tap into those kinds of locations with a much higher variability of wind power profile is not so attractive in comparison to solar. And what we have seen in the last even 2 to 3 years, that despite import duties on solar equipment going up, etc., cost of solar power has continued to fall, whereas wind power actually has become more expensive. So I think on the whole, there is a very strong preference for solar, and that is why even in my slides, but they were mainly focused on solar. There's very little activity in CNI wind space. Just to give you some numbers, on an average, annual installations in open access for solar are about anything about between 500 to 1,000 megawatts. In addition to rooftop solar, which is another 1,000 megawatts plus. But open access wind is believed to be less than 200 megawatts now, and is likely to remain at those low levels.
Still, no, a beautiful market segment. I mean, 200 megawatt. We are speaking about what, maybe $150 million investment per year in this market segment. So there might be some niches where it makes sense. And yes,
there are. You're right. There are.
Yeah, and there's a German companies, for example, like the Deutsche Windguard, which is now actually siting spots in India where the load profile, the generation profile of wind is more towards the evening hours in the night. So in combination with solar, that might make even more sense than we think today. I'm very excited to get the outcomes from the Deutsche Windgas. So generating wind, in the evening hours. This is happening in India, not at the late peak, but in the early evening. This is the case. Maybe Frank and Vinay, you wanted to chip in again?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is not to tell wind energy is bad. It's just we are talking about commercial and industrial. So wind is a utility scale application where the government is tendering out multi-megawatt or gigawatts of plant. I think wind will see some development in offshore, but all of that is not like physically related to the site for the manufacturing sites. So there is a physical decoupling. The wind turbines are elsewhere, and the power is transmitted into the loads, into the load centers, into the industrial estates. Whereas in solar, the solar is right on the roofs of the manufacturing plants.
Yeah. Vinay,
so this is not against wind. It's just a business.
Sorry, Frank.
Yeah. No, I just want to emphasize this is not against wind. We need wind.
Sure.
But
and the one market segment where CNI will chip in again is if they want to become a green RE100, you mentioned, right? So they would be able to purchase wind power from the electricity exchange now. And this might be an additional market segment for wind to sell in addition to other PPAs or participating in public PPAs, the discoms, to actually sell to the electricity exchange. Vinay, you also wanted to make an additional remark to this?
Just quickly, I think wind is definitely not competitive when it comes to cost, etc. And the share of wind in the total sector has been coming down. But I think you make a very, very important point that the generation profile of the wind on a daily basis and on a seasonal basis is very different in comparison to solar. So as solar capacity grows, I think more wind will be needed to make solar grow faster. Because without wind, then the variability in the grid will be too much and will be a big risk for both the utilities as well as for the CNI consumers. So to some extent, this can be, it is a win-win story for both wind and solar. But wind will always follow the kind of lagging. Wind will always be the lagging a component in the mix because of its cost and locational disadvantages.
Yeah, thank you for your clarification, Vinny. I think we have to come to an end. I was told by the organizer, but maybe one question here from Mr. Ilek to Rupamji. Diesel gensets in Delhi, are they still allowed? You were making some remarks on this. And are people switching to gas? And then this is a possibility to overcome regulations in regard to diesel gensets?
No, so diesel generators are definitely allowed. It's just that they've tried the use of diesel to the air quality index. So there is a sequence of events that the government will take to because air quality gets really bad. And one of the things in that list of actions they will take is to prohibit the use of diesel engines. So I would say effectively for about 4 months of the year, which is pretty much from late October to early February, you cannot use diesel engines in diesel gensets in the NCR area. And I suspect that the same rule will then get extended to other cities that have air quality problems as well. So now, as far as availability of gas goes, right? I mean, it's not that easily available. I mean, India, has a problem with the availability of gas. So,
but gas would be allowed, is the question?
Would it be allowed? Well, as long as there's an infrastructure, and I guess that's a long-term issue to be settled. I guess it would, as long as it solves the air quality issue. I guess it would be, but I don't think we are anywhere there where we start looking at it as an alternative, as a cleaner alternative to diesel. I don't think we're anywhere there.
So you suggest to leapfrog and switch directly to battery power, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
yeah. I think with this, we will close this session. Thank you very much. It was very interesting and exciting to me. This session, I think it's a highlight because we're talking about a niche market still, but which is growing, and yeah, where we will actually see that more and more corporate companies are digging into this opportunity out of several reasons, as Vinay and Frank pointed out. And yeah, we believe that this market segment will really grow, and we believe that German companies are really keen and willing to dig deeper into it. So very excited, and thanking you very much for your wonderful contributions and presentations. All these presentations will be made available. The video is also being made available on YouTube later on with links to the PowerPoint presentation for those who are interested. Once again, thanking Vamsa Batra for having given us this opportunity to present this interesting market segment, and yeah, looking forward to lots of German investments in any solar, wind, battery hybrid in the CNI segment in India. Thank you very much, and
Thank you very much for hosting this.
Thank you, Tobias.